Welcome everybody to the fourth and final of our awards and conference series. Today, themed around building assessments for the future. My name is Matt Wingfield. I'm CEO of the E-Assessment Association, who sponsor the awards and the conference, and I'm really delighted to welcome you all here to this, as I say, the fourth and final event in the series. Today we're going to be looking specifically at research and also lifetime contributions. So we'll be rewarding the applicants in the Best Research Award project and also highlighting a particular individual who's contributed a huge amount of expertise and effort to the world of supporting assessment through the use of technology. I'd like to mention very briefly the program for today, what we're going to be doing. So just to walk you through that. We're going to be starting with a keynote from Charles Fadel, who's founder and chairman for of the Center for Curriculum Redesign in America. And I'll give a proper introduction to Charles once we get to his keynote in a few minutes. I'm going to have a quick chat with Charles after his keynote, just to chat through some questions. And if you do have questions, either for Charles or for the panel discussion session we'll come to later on in the program, then please just do submit them either through the chat window to the side of the screen that you're viewing the event through, and that will pop up for me and for the speaker to be able to see, so that we can deal with that question. After that Q&A, we're going to move on to the first award presentation, looking at the Best Research Award. And we'll have a brief introduction to that award and then find out who won. We're going to take a 10-minute networking break at that point. And for those of you who haven't been engaging with our AirMeet networking platform, it's a virtual networking platform where you can go and sit and meet other people on virtual tables to exchange ideas and to have a chat. If you want to join that process at that 10-minute break and you're not already in that platform, then you'll need to go to the link shown on the screen, and that will allow you to gain access to the AirMeet platform and network away. And as I say, that will be a 10-minute break at that point, and we'll then come back to the second of our awards today for the Lifetime Contribution Award, and that will be then followed by a panel discussion. We've got a great lineup of experts from the world of assessment to contribute to that panel discussion. And again, if you've got questions for that panel discussion, please do enter them into the chat window on the platform that you're viewing the event through. And then we'll aim to wrap up by about 5 o'clock with a short networking meeting on the AirMeet platform at that point too. The other thing I wanted to mention at this point before we get into the grip of things is just a little bit about the E-Assessment Association, who, as I mentioned earlier on, sponsor the awards, or arrange and support the awards and the conference each year. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the association, we're a professional membership body that's all about empowering and propagating best practice in the use of technology-enabled assessment throughout the world. We've got nearly 2,500 members now, and we're supported by 24 commercial sponsors who provide us with sponsorship to deliver events like this and other ways that we interact with our membership. We send out newsletters every quarter, bringing our members up to speed with what's going on in the world. So if you're not already a member, please do join. It's a very simple process. It's free, which is a great bonus in terms of going through that sign-up process. Just go to e-assessment.com and click on the sign up or join now link in the top right-hand corner. Fill in a very simple form and you'll become a member, and you'll receive all of those benefits that I mentioned earlier on. Talking of benefits, one of the things that we're able to do through the conference and awards program this year is give some prizes away. And we're very honoured to be supported by Eric Shepherd, who's recently published a book called Talent Transformation. For those of you who are watching that little review of last week's award process, you'll have seen and heard Eric talking about the process of talent transformation. And he's very kindly gifted us 6 books to give away to each of the events that we're running. Those 6 winners will be drawn from the people who registered. So you may well be lucky enough to receive a physical book as a result of turning up to watch today's event, but the book is also available as an ebook at the link that was shown on the screen just now. So I think that's it, apart from just to say thank you to all of the people who are supporting this event today. PSI have been supporting the whole awards program. They're our headline sponsor for the conference and awards this year. So thank you very much to PSI. And specifically for today's event, the two awards that we're presenting are being supported by NCFE on the Best Research Award and Prometric on the Lifetime Contribution Award. And I wanted also to say a quick thank you to BTL Surpass for providing us with all of the technical support that allows us to put on the show that we're putting on today. So without further ado, what I'd like to do now is move on to our keynote presentation. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Charles Fadel, founder and chairman of the Center for Curriculum Redesign in Boston, in America. Charles founded the Centre in 2011, and it's a not-for-profit organisation dedicated to improving education by focusing on what students should learn to succeed in the 21st century. And in parallel to that, if that's not enough of enough time and focus for Charles, he's also a visiting scholar at Harvard Graduate School for Education. And before that, spent 12 years working for Cisco as their lead for education. So a huge amount of experience and thought leadership input that Charles can provide us through his keynote presentation. And I, for one, are really looking forward to hearing Charles talk about his experiences in this space. So Charles, thank you very much for joining us, and over to you to talk to us about all things to do with evolving our approaches to the curriculum.
Well, thank you so much, Matt, and thank you all for inviting me to present to you. So let me share my screen quickly. And bear with me as we go here. Okay, could I get an audio that you're actually hearing me and seeing this correctly?
That's all fine, thank you.
Say that again.
That's all fine, Charles. You're on. You're fine.
Okay, thank you. Well, so as you heard from Eric, we're all trying to get to a modern world where we need to measure technical competencies, but also skills and character qualities, meaning social, emotional, 21st century skills. And as he mentioned, as you survey frameworks around the world, you find that there's between 5 and 15 such parameters. Well, the longest journey starts with the first step. And if we want to be serious about formative assessments of these parameters, we have to figure out, well, what are they, and can we get to some form of homogeneity, or at least, a standard of sorts for around the world. So this is what we started doing. And just quickly to introduce my center, we're here to make education more relevant, and I don't have to expand on that. We're partnered with key global players, including the OECD and a few others. As you can see all the logos here. And we are working on both sides of the coin, meaning changing what should be taught, as well as the assessments that go hand in hand with them, because, as you all know so well, scorecards drive behavior. Pretty much like in the corporate world. If it's not on the scorecard, no one cares. If it's on the scorecard, everyone pays attention. So we might as well change the scorecard. When I wrote 21st Century Skills, it was clearly a success around the world, but a mitigated one, in the sense that everyone has embedded language in their curriculum in one way, shape, or form, but it is a Tower of Babel. Everyone has their own view of what we meant, although we tried to be as clear as possible, but somehow the message didn't go through. And it's a giant mess worldwide. Here's an example of just one framework and what kind of a giant mess it is, in the sense that they mix all sorts of things together. Why? Because these are typically created by a few people in a room in a few hours, and they don't have time to research these things properly. So what are the consequences? We have imprecise outcomes because we don't have a clear framework. We have fragmentation because we have, thousands of different frameworks. And of course, from an assessment perspective, we're unable to scale because we have this chasm there. So there's been very, very slow progress worldwide, and even worse. I'll get to that in a moment. So what did we do? We looked at how things were around the world. We synthesized 100+ frameworks. We analyzed, got research here and there from teachers to social media, you name it. And then we organized things so that we had something as comprehensive as possible, but as compact as possible, with variables that were as uncorrelated as reasonable, at the right layer of abstraction, meaning tying your shoelaces and learning how to learn, not the same thing. And finally, it had to be globally relevant to be used in any culture. So we looked high and low, from the Association of Manufacturers to Thailand, from Finland to you name it. It was all around the world. And then we did so in a very, very scientific way, meaning every paper, every framework we looked at, we kept track of so we could see what is the commonality in the language that is used. So we can trace back any specific word or any specific sentence we've used to the sources. And this is what emerges. Okay, so I'm an electrical engineer by training, and this is what came to me. It's like, wow, everyone talks about the same thing, but in just slightly annoying different ways. Like power sockets. They're all slightly different around the world, just enough to make them incompatible, and yet they're still vehicling the same basal information of, power supply here. So we came up with something that was comprehensive, that of course took account knowledge, listed the appropriate skills, listed the appropriate character qualities, and the meta-learning abilities. These 12 parameters you see at the bottom, between skills, character, and meta-learning, are what we call the competencies. We wanted to make sure that they were as orthogonal or uncorrelated as possible. We did quantitative analyses, we did qualitative analyses, and then we tested against Finland. And oh, by the way, you can detect that the curiosity column is empty. It's the only one that's completely empty. No, I'm sorry, there's a second one. We tested against Brazil, we tested against Microsoft, any framework out there, you can test with this Rosetta Stone of sorts. We tested even against Bureau of Labor Statistics demand. And you can see that knowledge, including its psychomotor equivalent, are necessary but not sufficient. Jobs require resilience, courage, collaboration, critical thinking, as does life. So that was not enough, of course, to be precise. So we went and defined sub-competencies. There's 60 sub-competencies for these 12 competencies. And here's an example. For mindfulness, this is what the collective wisdom from around the world says mindfulness is about. And then for each one of these 60, we did orthogonality analysis to make sure, again, that we were not duplicating variables unnecessarily. And then for each one of them, we are defining proficiency levels. I'll give you a few seconds to take a look. So you see how the proficiency levels build on each other. And this is just a very, very pale early rendition. We have proceeded far beyond this, but it's not public yet. Now, we also did a study with Brookings to see, well, how are countries faring in terms of these competencies? What have they done in deploying skills and character and meta-learning? Well, not much. Not a single one of the pins represented here, not a single one of these jurisdictions offers pedagogy nor assessments. In other words, they're telling teachers, we have these requirements, we're not telling you how to teach them, and we're not giving you assessments for them. Good luck to you. Well, we thought that was not fair. And that's what we're working on, both pedagogy and assessments for these. And so to conclude, I want to mention that this is really important for us in assessment, because if we think about the state of the world, one can look at this analogy, this logical analogy, right? So lack of education or poor education is at the root of human problems. Everything we see around us is related to a lack of ethics, a lack of empathy, a lack of critical thinking, and so on and so forth. And yet, it is assessments that define the education we get, because everyone is geared towards being measured in one way, shape, or form. Scorecards drive behavior. So if we have an incomplete scorecard, it's certainly not going to drive the right behavior. So we're missing the right assessments for the right competencies. And therefore, the consequence is it's our problem to solve. If we don't have the right assessments embedded everywhere, then we're going to have the wrong behavior by humans, because these competencies do not end up being taught. I realize this is a little bit provocative, but not that much when you think about it. You may say, well, but as an assessment industry, we don't decide. It's really jurisdictions that decide. And I'm saying, well, yeah, well, why won't you push them to decide on formatively measuring these competencies? To help you read more, because we only have a limited amount of time now, I'm going to let you take a screenshot of this, or quickly write down these bit.ly links so you can download these reports if you will. I don't have physical books like Eric to send you, but, well, you can at least download these, yes, for free. And I'll give you another 10 seconds. And same thing here, 21st century skills is now dated, and four-dimensional education describes in far more detail and far more specificity what we've been talking about here. Again, I'll give you a few seconds. And again, this is a free download. We are a nonprofit, and this is meant to propagate our mission. It's available in a number of languages as well. And so with that, I thank you, and I'm very pleased to answer any questions you might have.
That's great. Thank you very much, Charles, for that. That's a really interesting take on how the whole curriculum piece needs to evolve and catch up with what we as a world and as a modern society need our learners to be engaged with. And I was curious, actually, when you're talking about this importance, the importance of the 4D education model, which I really like, and I think makes a huge amount of sense. I'm conscious that, if you look back, and not very far at all, to when 21st century skills or soft skills started to appear on the landscape, I think policymakers and educators struggled with that a little bit, perhaps because of the disconnect between curriculum and assessment, as you were describing. But I was curious as to see whether or not you come across any examples of places that are starting to make positive moves towards that. So would you pick any particular places in the world that are embracing this or moving closer towards that 4D education space, do you think?
Well, yes and no, meaning the Brookings study has shown that a lot of places want to do this, but how many have actually been serious about it? From Singapore to Finland, even the best examples out there show that they're leaving their teachers to figure it out. So imagine being a teacher having never been trained to these competencies. And if you are trained, it's some kind of horizontal academic training about this is what critical thinking is, or this is what communication is. And then good luck to you. Just throw in the classroom and figure out how to embed critical thinking in mathematics. So what happens? You have teachers who think, well, I think that just because I'm teaching mathematics, I'm automatically teaching critical thinking. And that's so not true. So the key here is to educate the teachers that these things have specific pedagogical practices that can be embedded explicitly. So we are very, how can I say, intense. We call these, the need for this to be explicit, deliberate, comprehensive, systematic, and demonstrable. It's a mouthful. But by the time you get to demonstrable, no one can say, oh yeah, we're doing all of these things. Everyone might be doing some of these things some of the time. No one is doing them at scale in no country or no school in the world. So you can say, well, so what? What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is the world that we face. We have populations that don't understand information literacy, how to think critically about a piece of information. We have policymakers who don't understand what's a core concept behind an issue. For instance, they might have learned exponentials in math. They're clueless about the fact that that exponentials are deceiving than explosive. Think about it, deceiving than explosive. And so you have people saying, oh, but you only have 18 cases in London this week. What's the problem? Yeah, in 2 weeks, you'll have 18,000 cases. So it's this complete lack of deep critical thinking and everything else that goes with it that we're suffering from. And yet it is not taught properly, if at all.
Because I often reflect, and I think you and I were talking about this informally the other day, but about the difference between recognizing that 21st century skills or 4D education is a thing, and that it's an aspirational thing that we want to move to. There's a difference between that and actually delivering it. And I think I was relaying to you, I remember a conversation I had with the Ministry of Education in Singapore a few years ago, where they were looking at the UK education system admirably because of all of the entrepreneurs like Richard Branson and folk like that have come out of the UK. And me finding that quite amusing, really, because you can definitely argue that people like Richard Branson have come out with those skills despite of our education system, not because of it. And I wondered whether you'd seen similar parallels to that, or whether you'd come across similar things to that, because for people, having that aspiration, but then really not understanding how to make the connection to the delivery.
Well, yes, and in two explicit cases you have mentioned. First of all, I did meet with Sir Richard on his island. I was a lucky guest of his, and yes, he was constantly asking me, "So tell me again, why do we need an education at all?" And say, "Well, you're somewhat different from the rest. The rest, needs an education, but it also shows that entrepreneurship was not educated. It just happened in spite of the system, as you said." And what Singapore is looking at so longingly is really the societal structures of these countries. We just released another report, it's fresh on our website, on how countries compare to each other on these 4D competencies. And it's very interesting because you will find that typically you'll find the Nordic/Baltic countries at the top. Then you'll find a surprising mix of middle-income countries, like Brazil for courage, number one. Who knew? Well, I guess with the president they have, it's kind of normal. They would need that. Sorry for the political statement. Then with Mexico being number one in growth mindset, Thailand being number one in mindfulness. So it shows that, yes, even individuals or countries, in this case countries, that are not usually celebrated can shine when you look at the entire individual, the entire country across a range of parameters. So its societal structures have been built to allow some of these things, which is admirable, but it's not enough. We may be losing some of that because the impact of spirituality and governments and so on has been waning, and that needs to be replaced by something perhaps more formal but more systematic within the school system. And sometimes it's just that a country may be good at, let's say, critical thinking, but really bad at creativity. Well, then just turn up the dials, like on an equalizer. You just turn up the dial for the frequencies, quote unquote, that would work well for your country and are most needed in your country. So Singapore could say, I'm doing well at knowledge and I'm going to push for the competencies. Or they could say, I'm doing well at curiosity, I'm going to push for mindfulness, whatever it is.
Yes. Okay. No, that's an interesting. So focus on the areas, your areas of strength, focus on your areas where you need to do more and try and amplify and promote those more.
Correct. And not that everyone should be at maximum regime on everything. It's simply that you don't want to have an absolute deficiency in any one of them. And of course, you play to your strength, but you also don't want to have a catastrophic rating on ethics, for instance.
No, indeed. Well, Charles, we could carry on talking about this for a long time, but alas, we haven't got the time to do that now. Thank you very much for providing the links to those further bits of reading, and I hope that delegates will take you up on your kind offer of downloading those and reviewing those at their leisure. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. I know it's been quite a fraught time with you, for ceilings collapsing in your office and everything else trying to conspire to stopping you joining us today. But thank you very much for doing so. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you.
My pleasure. Enjoy. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So we're now going to move on to the first award of the afternoon. And this is for the Best Research Project Award. And without research, many things that we move to change through time wouldn't happen. The Research Award this year is very kindly sponsored by NCFE. And I'd like to introduce Dan Howard, Director of Operations for NCFE, who's going to take us through a little bit more about the award, the finalists, and then announce the all-important winner. So Dan, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you for the introduction, and it's an absolute pleasure for NCFE to be supporting and sponsoring the Research Award this year. In terms of who NCFE are, we are an educational services charity, and we specialise in vocational and technical education, predominantly in the development and certification of qualifications, as well as production of various types of assessment and learning content and resources. So, very particular part of what we're doing here at NCFE at the moment is using research to help us to establish and develop need. And we firmly believe, and one of our key strategic outcomes as an organisation is to use that research to help us to develop the right qualifications, the right content and learning resources that help our customers and ultimately their beneficiaries in all of the communities that we serve. It's from looking at the category, it's been a difficult one for the judges, and I believe we do have a short video to play that's been recorded by Gareth Hopkins, who's the E-Assessment Association board member and one of the judges for the Best Research Award. So let's take a look at that short video.
Hi everyone, my name is Gareth Hopkins. I'm an assessment solutions specialist and the lead technical officer at the E-Assessment Association. This year, I had the privilege of being on the panel of judges for the Best Research Award category, along with my 3 other judges. Sarah Rogerson, who is the chair of the panel, is the Director of Assessment at Oxford University Press and the Vice Chair of the E-Assessment Association. Dr. Eleanor Anderson, who is an education researcher and consultant, and Angela Vachur, a senior researcher at CETO. The Best Research Award sought to find a truly exceptional piece of research related to e-assessment, focusing on sound methodology and the potential for the results to have a wider impact and influence on the e-assessment field. From the entries, we shortlisted 2 outstanding pieces of research. In no particular order, they were Purdue University and RM with Learning by Evaluation with RM Compare and Brightpath Assessment. Both entries made significant use of comparative judgment software, but in different ways. Purdue University's research used RM's Compare software as a primer for a cohort of students on a design thinking course at the beginning of their assignment. Their research was able to show that the students primed using the comparative judgment method developed a stronger understanding of what good looks like and improved their attainment on the course compared to those who had not received the same primer. Brightpath Assessment from Australia used comparative judgment to provide teachers with detailed information about their students' progression in learning and what their students need to learn next. Underpinned by 30 years worth of research, the Brightpath system impressed the judges with its clear design and the impact it's had on assessment and learning in Australia. The panel of judges would like to offer our congratulations to both of our finalists and thank them for taking the time to provide clear and detailed answers to all of the award criteria. We wish you the best in the future, as well as for the continued success of your projects. Thank you.
Picking up on some of the notes from the judges of this category, the judges really enjoyed learning more about Bright Path assessments. Clearly a well-designed product that's been underpinned by a body of excellent research, and it's clearly a product that has a big impact upon teaching and learning. And the entry from Purdue University and RM was a concrete piece of research that was well thought out and designed. The research was presented very clearly with a hypothesis, methodology, results, and impact. The piece of research had impressive results and shows great promise for the future. The judges were unanimous in their decision, and that the winner for the Best Research 2021 is Purdue University and RM with their entry, Learning by Evaluation. Congratulations.
Fantastic. That's wonderful news, I'm sure, for Purdue and RM. Dan, thank you very much. I know you've been suffering today from the effects of your second COVID jab, so well done for getting through that.
Not a problem.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Just to reach out and thanks to the judges for this category. So Sarah, Eleanor, Angela, and Gareth who created that video. So, you know, I know it was a difficult piece to judge, but congratulations to both finalists and to Purdue for the win.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Dan.
Thanks a lot.
So many congratulations to Purdue University and RM Education for their win there in the Best Research category. And hopefully we're going to be chatting to the winners there a little bit later on in the event. So we'll find out a little bit more about the project then. We're going to move now to a networking break for 10 minutes in the AirMeet platform. Again, if you're watching the show live through the EAA's website or YouTube or Vimeo, you can't access the networking event from those platforms. But if you follow the link, which I'm hoping Tim can pop up on the screen for us now, you can get across to our networking area and join in the networking on the AirMeet platform. As I say, we'll run this break for just about 10 minutes, give you a chance to network. For those of you who don't want to go network, and please don't feel compelled to do so, we're going to play a highlights video during that break, so you can watch, relax, and then join us back again in 10 minutes time at 5 minutes to the hour, when we'll move to announce the Lifetime Contribution Award. So enjoy the networking or relaxing break, and we'll see you again in 10 minutes.
So it's my great pleasure to introduce the presenter for the next award, the Best Workplace or Talent Assessment Project. It's Patrick Craven, who's the Executive Director for Strategic Partnerships, Policy and Stakeholders at City and Guilds. So hello.
Hiya, and thank you very much, Fiona. My name's Patrick Craven, Director of Policy and Stakeholder Partnerships, as Fiona said, at City and Guilds. And it really is a privilege and a pleasure to sponsor this category and to continue our long-standing support of the work of the Assessment Association. For those of you who don't know City and Guilds, we're an awarding organisation that's been in existence for over 140 years. And we certificate millions of learners each year, both across the UK and globally. I think the importance of recognising workforce potential to identify new talent sources has quite simply been accelerated by the situation we've faced over the last 15 months. Now more than ever, employers must make even more effective use of their existing workforce and seek out and discover new sources of talent.
I'm Graham Hudson, Secretary to the EAA and Chair of the Judges of the Best Workplace and Talent Assessment Project Award. We were very impressed with the two organisations shortlisted. Both organisations demonstrated a keen interest and passion in the outcome of their projects, and with clear commitment from their supporting teams. First was TCS Iron with the National Qualifier Test. This project was about giving access to workplace interviews for students leaving college and higher education. Instead of corporations attempting to visit as many college and university campuses as they could to interview candidates, TCS set up the National Qualifier Test instead. And next we looked at PSI Services, a project called A Question of Care. Is a care career for you? This project was initiated by a charitable customer of PSI Services that wished to encourage those who were interested in a care career to explore this further. It provided a means of exploring what caring involved, as well as providing a measure of fit for the individual. A comprehensive set of support materials was produced as part of the project.
The decision to confirm the award for the winning project hinged on the benefit that the project gave to the key stakeholders and users, providing significant life-changing opportunities to many that would not have been available previously. And so I'm delighted to announce that the winner of the 2021 award for the Best Workplace or Talent Assessment Project is Tata Consultancy Services Limited with the TCS National Qualifier Test. Congratulations.
Round of applause. Congratulations to Tata, that's wonderful. Now we have the chance to speak to our panel. So this is wonderful. Given improvements in technology for assessments, what shape should learning and assessment take in order to be more adaptable and relevant and support lifelong learning mindsets? Anyone like to start us off with?
Well, if I could jump in here. So one, I think smaller, bite-sized learning and decision support systems, so people can work out which of the competencies they want to develop, which competencies they want endorsed by a credential, and then in the way of building these micro-credentials into a larger credential. So it's that's what I would like to
I think one of the fundamental things that we have to get right is design a curriculum in such a way that it can support large programs, so it can support something which is delivered in 16 to 18-year-old compulsory education, but equally it can be disaggregated in ways that allow people at later stages of their lives to engage with relevant components and pick up, because the reality is that many people in their working life don't need to go back and do a 2-year full-time program of study, even if they had the luxury to be able to do so. What many people always need to be able to do is to reflect on how they can maintain the currency of their skill set and their capabilities, and that requires a far more atomized system. And I think, therefore, for me, the relationship is between the design of curriculum, the delivery of learning, and the connection with assessment opportunities.
I think I'd echo what Patrick's saying on that story as well. Is I think we're still seeing too many organisations, too many awarding organisations, particularly sort of just pushing a paper and pen exercise onto technology without thinking about how that assessment is taking forward. So I think we're still in a position where, probably with high stakes exams, we're still seeing that journey, and I think it needs almost people to. Can people have the opportunity to step back, look at that, how they're assessing people, and then redesign it? Because I think at the moment we've made probably short steps towards using technology, but we're not embracing, we're not using it how it should be.
So talking about making decisions and things, we know that we're in the pandemic. We are still in the pandemic. We are trying to come out of the pandemic. It has been a whirlwind for the world. You know, it's changed everything. What do you think has been the more positive impacts on digital assessment in particular, and in education, training and lifelong learning of this moment that we're in, the COVID moment? Ali, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, I think the key things which are really obvious, us sitting here right now, having a conference virtually, I think the assumption that, which some of the challenges around, on paper versus digital, I think that argument has been kind of very clearly answered. And I think as a society, I think we're all very now accustomed to the world of the digital, maybe too accustomed. But from a perspective of delivery of assessments digitally, I think there is now a much larger acceptance around that as a fair, safe, reliable route. And I think that kind of shift in kind of mindset around technology, I think is something which is palpable, and it's not just happening in one location, it's happening around the world. Everyone's experienced the same event at the same time.
I just wanted to say, from a slightly different viewpoint, I'm a governor of a junior school, and we work very hard, the staff work very hard to ensure access for students. And that had positive effects in 2 or 3 ways. One, those who were studying from home had the opportunity to engage in a way, particularly in an oral way that they didn't necessarily have in the classroom, which was a level of engagement that was very positive for them. The other was, because there weren't quite so many children in the school, those with special educational needs or who were on pupil premium were given more attention actually in the classroom, which was beneficial to them.
I now have an opportunity to talk to the winners of the awards. This really is an international award. It's wonderful, and the best implementation was fantastic. And it's so good that we can talk to each other, isn't it? It's great. Absolutely. Yeah. So, do you want to say a little bit, Satya? Would you like to say a little bit about?
Absolutely. So, Fiona, first of all, thank you so much, and we are really honored. And I know, in today's world, how difficult it is, all of us trying to make some difference, and it's really great to be recognized by EA. And of course, there's no introduction needed by EA and all. We are part of the organization since a couple of years, and we see the kind of work what you guys do, and it's really great pleasure to be recognized, and it really gives a lot of motivation to continue the good work for the society.
I would like to thank the key assessment organization and the juries for giving us this award. It's a great achievement. For us, 850 of us, Excellence, how we call ourselves. We've been in this industry, we've been in this arena for almost 20 years, keeping a low profile and implementing complicated solutions, addressing the pain points of customers globally. So I think it's a worthy award that we got finally. I think probably this is the first year we participated in this, and we were finalists in 2 categories. One was the innovative product, and second was this. So really glad. If not for the curfew we have here because of the pandemic, you're probably dancing in the streets.
And thank you again to our sponsors, our headline sponsors, PSI, and thank you to City and Guilds, and thank you to the British Council. We're so happy to be able to present awards. It's a nice thing to be able to do in these particular trying times, but it's good that we can do that and keep promoting the use of e-assessment across the different sectors, and training, as we said, is the new one for us. It's exciting to be able to see where that's going to go.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the break there, and for those of you who watched the highlights video, I hope you enjoyed watching the highlights from last week's event, which was packed with some really interesting stuff. And as Fiona was talking about there, introduced us to the world of supporting training and talent. So a really interesting event. So thank you for joining us back again for now the second award category this afternoon that we're looking at, which is the Lifetime Contribution Award. It's slightly different to the other awards that we present in that this is looking to highlight a particular individual who's made significant contribution to the sector. This year, very kindly sponsored and supported by Prometric. And I'm delighted to introduce to the stage now Garrett Sherry, who's Vice President of account management for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for Prometric. Gareth, lovely to see you, and over to you to take us through the Lifetime Contribution Award.
Thanks, Matt, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be with you all today to present the 2021 Lifetime Achievement Award. As Matt said, I lead Prometric's commercial operations in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and I've been involved in the assessment industry for nearly 17 years now. Not quite a lifetime, but although some days recently it does seem to feel a little bit like that. Prometric, as many of you will know, is a leading global provider of technology-enabled assessment and testing solutions. We've been at the forefront of paving the assessment industry's path forward with new solutions and innovation for over 30 years now, but always with the objective of empowering people to realize their personal potential, and doing that by providing reliable access to secure assessments anytime, anywhere. And that mission has never been more important than in the past 15 months. We work in partnership with many of the world's most recognized licensing and certification organizations, academic institutions, and government agencies as well. And we support more than 7 million test takers annually around the world in our testing locations in around 180 countries, and more recently via our remote assessment service. The E-Assessment Association's commitment to building the awareness of benefits of technology and what that brings to assessment, particularly around delivering better learning and assessment, is really in lockstep with Prometric's core values and informs our support of EAA. We have a deep commitment to furthering the science of assessment, especially in how technology can be applied to improve candidate experience and allow people to reliably and fairly demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and abilities. And to that end, we were actually the founding sponsor of the Centre for Assessment, Research, Policy and Practice in Education, CARPE for short, at Dublin City University back in 2015. And Professor Michael O'Leary, the Prometric Chair of Assessment at CARPE, and his team over the past number of years have produced some really important research in the area of technology-based assessment in education and the professional certification space. With that commitment to the evolving application of technology in assessment, it was a natural choice for us to sponsor the association's Lifetime Achievement Award, which acknowledges the contribution made by an individual who, in the opinion of the independent panel of judges, deserves to be honoured for their contribution and sustained commitment to e-assessment over the duration of their career, and has had an influence on the design, development, promotion, execution and support of the assessment at a local, regional or international level. And there is no doubt that this year's recipient not only meets but considerably exceeds these criteria. So it is now my distinct honour to announce that this year's E-Assessment Association Lifetime Contribution Award goes to Professor Jeff Masters. So Professor Jeff Masters is Chief Executive of the Australian Council for Educational Research, ACER, and a role that he's held since 1998. He's published widely in the fields of educational assessment and research, and is a globally renowned speaker on progressive assessment, including e-assessment. Under Professor Masters' direction, ACER has grown from a national organisation based in Melbourne to one of the world's leading educational research centres specialising in assessment. ACER now has regional offices in 5 cities in Australia and 5 international offices. And indeed, it was my pleasure to visit the wonderful ACER campus in Melbourne in February 2020 on my last overseas trip just before the dreaded lockdown. As CEO, Professor Masters has presided over ACER's embrace of e-assessment, including the development and delivery of the first digital assessments for OECD PISA in 2006 for science, in 2009 for reading, and 2012 for mathematics and problem solving, all using innovative interactive item formats. The first international assessment of computer and information literacy with IEA's ILS program in 2013 and 18. The initiation of online adaptive assessment designs that have been implemented in national population assessment programs, including the Scottish National Standardisation Assessments and the Australian National Assessment Program in Literacy and Numeracy. He also oversaw the establishment of a thriving in-house software development unit that's facilitated the delivery of over 30 million e-assessments worldwide. an enviable body of achievement for sure. So I'm delighted that Jeff is able to join us today. Many congratulations, Jeff, and you're very welcome to the stage now for a few words of reply.
Well, thank you very much, Gareth. Let me say how honoured I am to be receiving this prestigious award. It came as a real surprise, and I'm humbled to have my work recognised in this way. In the short presentation that I have an opportunity to make now, I'm going to argue that digital assessments have the potential to change fundamentally the way we think about assessment. Let me explain what I mean, and let me use assessment in schools as an example. In schools, assessments are commonly made in relation to a curriculum that's delivered to all students. Assessments are often based on standardised tests or examinations, and they lead to, as we know, marks, percentages, grades that are used to judge and compare student performances. And under this scheme, inevitably, some students learn less than others and receive low grades, sometimes year after year. And a problem with this is that a student who receives a grade of, say, D year after year is unable to see the absolute progress they're making, and worse, may conclude that there's something stable about their ability to learn. That is, they're a D student. But this traditional way of thinking about learning, thinking about assessment, is deeply entrenched. But it's often inconsistent with the realities of learning, as the example I'm about to show you illustrates. A group of mathematics education, I'm assuming you can see this, a group of mathematics education researchers in Australia decided to define a number of levels of mathematical knowledge. These levels are shown on the left here. These levels have nothing to do with how old students are, what grade of school they're in. They're simply levels of increasing mathematical knowledge and understanding. Level 1's the lowest level, level 8 the highest. They then assessed students in grades 5 to 9 to see which levels of mathematical knowledge these students demonstrated. So this was an Australia-wide sample of students. At the top left, you can see that there were some 5th graders who were already at the highest level, level 8 in mathematics. At the bottom right, some 9th graders who were still at the lowest level, level 1, and everything in between. These researchers concluded that the spread within each of these grades was the equivalent to about 7 years of mathematics learning. To me, these findings are a reminder that the assessments we need, not just in Australia, but everywhere, are assessments of where individuals are in their learning, regardless of their age, regardless of the grade of school that they're in. And this is where I believe e-assessments come into their own. E-assessments have the potential to shift the focus of assessment from education to learning, from judging and grading to understanding. And this is essential if we're to identify where learners are in their learning, pinpoint the point that they've reached in their learning, and to help them progress from that point. E-assessments also provide a basis for monitoring progress over time, not just another C grade or another D grade year after year, but a chart of the real progress an individual is making. For example, through these 8 levels of increasing mathematics knowledge. And in a digital environment, there's no reason why every student should take exactly the same standardized test or standardized examination. E-assessments, as we all know, can be adaptive. Students who are struggling can be asked easier questions. Students who are not being challenged can be asked more difficult questions. E-assessments also have the potential to provide more powerful diagnostic information about obstacles to student progress. The challenge here, I think, is to build into our assessments expert professional knowledge about the kinds of misunderstandings that learners develop, the kinds of errors that learners commonly make, and then to create ways of automatically formulating and testing hypotheses about the specific difficulties that individuals are experiencing. So in these ways, e-assessments, I believe, have the potential to break down old ways of thinking about assessment. If the fundamental purpose of assessment is recognised as a process of establishing and understanding where learners are in their learning, then this information can be used to look backwards, to reflect on the progress that an individual has made since some earlier time, but also at the same time to look forward, to identify what the learner's ready to learn next. So in short, what I'm saying is that e-assessments have the potential to make assessment what it always should have been, really, an integral part of good pedagogy and learning. Let me finish here and let me finish by congratulating the E-Assessment Association on its leadership in this area. I encourage you to be ambitious in your efforts to bring about the much needed reconceptualisation and reform of educational assessment. And let me thank you again, including Prometric, for the honour that you've bestowed on me. Thank you.
So many congratulations, Jeff. A well-deserved win there in the Lifetime Contribution Award, and a really interesting presentation that you gave there, much of which I completely agree with. I think the whole personalisation of assessment is where e-assessment can really help and deliver assessment that suits the context of the learning, the context of the individual. So fantastic stuff. Thank you very much, and many congratulations once again. Thank you again also to Prometric and to Gareth for taking us through that award, and to Prometric for sponsoring the award. So I'd like to move us on now to the panel discussion. And I'm delighted to be joined by a panel of experts from right across the assessment sphere. We have Dr. Elena Andresen joining us. She's an educational researcher and consultant and was a member of the Research Awards panel this year. Dr. Peter Alston, who's Director of Learning Design in the School of Technology at BPP University, and was a member of our Summative Award judging panel this year. Janine Oliver from NCFE, who's Head of Assessment Innovation there, and as you've already heard, sponsored the Best Research Award, and Garrett Sherry, who you've just heard from, VP of Account Management for EMA at Prometric. And again, thank you to Prometric for supporting the award. We're also really delighted to have Jeff joining us on the panel as well. Jeff, I know it's 1 o'clock in the morning for you, so thank you very much for sticking with us and joining us for this panel discussion. Very much appreciated. So we've heard an awful lot today about how important research is in supporting change. And change is always a difficult thing to bring about. And I think research can play a really important part in supporting that change, if not else, for nothing else, sorry, for giving people inspiration and confidence in change. But I do worry that research is often seen as the preserve of academics and universities, and that, general people, you and I, grassroots teachers, find it difficult to engage with. And I wondered whether there were ways that ideas you'd thought about, ways you've encountered that help us engage a wider set of people in the whole research space. And Jeff, given ACER's focus on research, I wondered whether I might come to you first on this and just get your thoughts on how we widen this inclusive piece around research.
Yes, thanks, Matt. I'm not sure that there's a simple answer to this question, but I think what I would say is that partnerships are really important. It's important to bring together people with different kinds of expertise, bring together assessment specialists, psychometricians, IT specialists, ed tech companies, educational researchers, perhaps practitioners, and to bring them together around a particular issue of practice, and to participate together in attempting to address that issue to solve a specific problem. I've seen this work in very limited ways, but I've never seen it work in quite the way that I'm envisaging, where you really do attempt to have a multidisciplinary team focused on attempting to solve a specific problem in this space.
Thank you for that. Eleanor, I know that when you and I were talking a few days ago, you talked about an organisation, the Research Ed Network. Is that potentially a vehicle for trying to bring people together to look at this in the way that Jeff is talking about, do you think?
Well, I mean that that exists and is a very active group of teachers who are researching, they are practicing, and they are sharing their best practice with each other, and so it's a very active way of doing things. And I think there's also, I keep finding myself thinking about this word sort of nudge, which is, are there little things we can be doing to nudge things in the right direction? Because the other thing we were talking about was the sort of the cultural shift, which I find very interesting. It's kind of, I don't think anybody's disputing the technology is around and the ideas are there, but it's sort of how we get that critical mass to sort of not reproduce what's there necessarily, but to make that shift, and I think that people practicing and sharing that best practice and being real sort of action research is one way certainly to go, and one way to open it up beyond people, as you say, thinking it's just academics doing something over here, rather than a network of people moving towards a different way of practicing. So.
Yes, yeah, no, indeed, and I guess sort of hand in hand with that, because I think part of the problem is we, as and I think this is unintentional, but as a society of researchers, if you like, we reinforce some of those messages that this is the preserve of academics. And one of the ways I think we do that is that we hide away all of the research behind journal paywalls, which makes it difficult for people to get access to it unless you've got a subscription to the journal, or unless you're willing to fork out £30 in order to just go and have a look at that particular paper. Pete, you've done a lot of work in this area, and I know you did a PhD in e-research, so you've got the answer to all of this. What are your thoughts on all of this?
You're right that notion of research is in the realms of the academia and the university space is a challenge one. I mean, myself, when I was doing my own research, is that you're lucky to be a member of a library, university library, so you can get access to not everything, but get access to some kind of really critical journals and some key papers that you just wouldn't be able to get access to otherwise. And I think that's a really big challenge. I mean, it's not something brand new. People have been speaking long before I kind of talk about it now, about kind of bringing down that paywall and making research open to everyone so that we can benefit. So not just universities and educational institutions, but everyone. And I came across a tweet a couple of days ago that, again, almost kind of seems so simple. It was somebody just tweeted about why we have a kind of Spotify for music and we have Netflix. Why can't we have a Spotify equivalent for research where people can pay a nominal kind of fee, but get access to everything, and everyone has the same access to everything in terms of kind of when you're engaging with projects, that we can all get access, because it shouldn't be locked away, never to be read, unless your institution is part of a subscription that pays extortionate amounts for journal access. But again, I do see that the kind of the flip side of why some people are publishing in these journals. Part of it is around the research excellence framework and the impact factors that comes with journals. And so it is a tricky situation, but yeah, open up research, lots of open source journals, freely accessible, and kind of get it out more. Certainly that's what I'd like for my work. The more people that read it, the better.
Well, I was going to say, because that's the ironic thing, isn't it? That a lot of the things that drive academic research is about sharing that practice and making sure that you've got a broad readership so that you can get the critique and the feedback on it that you'd want. And Janine, just coming to you, I know NCFE, this is research is a thing that's close to NCFE's heart, and I know you're doing some really interesting stuff looking sort of to the future in terms of where assessment needs to move. What's your view on this whole research thing and making it accessible?
My view is that research actually is going to be fundamental in helping us to transition through the next stages of education and assessment. We've heard over the last 12 months about a need for change in the sector, from the way that it's delivered and designed to the way that we actually assess education. and that's one of the reasons we've really built research in the core of what we're doing from a transformation program. The other thing, though, I think that from a sector perspective, we really need to start to embrace innovation and support organisations to move things forward. So it's not just we're doing a piece of research, we're doing a piece of research with that purpose of making a change and showcasing the impact to the people doing the job out there with learners.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's really important. But of course, with innovation comes the need to prove that the innovation is impactful in a positive way, and that it's actually delivering change in the way that you want it to. And Gareth, I mean, I know from a provider's perspective, that's an important part of this whole piece, isn't it? In helping your customers, your users, to understand that impact that can be had.
Sure, absolutely, and one of the reasons we're involved in supporting the Centre for Assessment Research in Dublin City University is for exactly that purpose, to help leverage that academic research in a practical operational situation with our customers. And also, I mean, one of the things we're attempting to do is to make that research more widely available to people who are practitioners in the discipline. So we're using a lot of the white papers that are coming out of that research in supporting ideas that we're putting forward to our clients, and how they can change and improve their assessments in a practical way. I mean, there's one classic example of it, and the industry still wedded to it, but there's a fabulous piece of research that the folks at Carpe have done on the use of a third distractor. It turns out it's completely useless, but everybody still persists. Oh, we have to have a key and three distractors in multiple choice questions. Turns out, the maths or the data says you don't. It's completely useless. It's a waste of time. The vast majority of people never choose it, and people spend far too much time, trying to think of how can we, So, and we, and that's just something we've been trying to use that to help our clients just have a different perspective on how they can change and improve, because the data says, what you've been doing for years is a waste of time. So, why keep knocking your head against the brick wall and all that kind of stuff. So,
and that really sums up the reason why having access to research across the broad spectrum of everyone is important, isn't it? Because people need to know what works, what doesn't work, and I think that's very important. But I guess having that knowledge and understanding the impactfulness of something is just part of the story. The other part, which Eleanor, you touched on briefly, so I might come to you on this one first, if you don't mind, but that's about that cultural piece, that there's still that rift or that disconnect between what the technology can do, because it, and that just continues exponentially to increase about what we can do with technology, and the way that culture and society keeps up with that. So have you any thoughts on how we sort of minimize that rift, how we get it closer together, how we get practitioners starting to understand from a cultural perspective why we should make these changes?
Well, I think some of that, I mean, we heard some of that earlier about the sort of shift between, school and then post-secondary with supplying work, and now work is informing what is needed. And I think it's about purpose, isn't it? That's one of the things, whether it's formative or summative, it's why are we doing this? What are we assessing people for? And the answer to that question may not always be the same. And I think, one of the things I'm quite conscious of is not giving out a message to people that the way we've been doing everything for years is completely wrong. Let's just put all that in the bin and let's, and so, I mean, we don't, but it's just kind of, we need to take people with us, so to speak. Yeah. And that will require multiple different ways of doing so, whilst obviously also thinking, that there's lots of call out there, or is there, but that for that very, the compulsory, the schools-based assessments, GCSEs, A-level, etc. We end up trying to replicate what's happening now on screen, perhaps. And is that what we should be doing? Should we be rethinking the whole thing? We should be rethinking the whole thing, maybe. But it's just kind of there are multiple different ways of looking at this, and I think, as I say, I wouldn't like to suggest to people that what we've been doing till now is wrong, and here we go. I mean, obviously, research shows us new things all the time, and that's the whole point. But equally, we really need to start finding those ways to bring lots of people along a particular path. And that, if the technology really does what the technology really does, then that should be relatively straightforward. And of course, there's a political and cultural and all those things in each individual country. And they, again, require different approaches, but we have to start somewhere. And, the last year seems to have been provided an enormous driver, obviously, for allowing people to look at things very differently. And so, we're a bit further down that road, I think.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess all we can hope is that we don't step too far back when things start to return to normal, particularly at the high stakes assessment stage, where there's every incentive to go back to the thing that you knew worked, in inverted commas, and using paper. And Jeff, I'm curious, because obviously ACR have worked on national scales as well. And I'm thinking of the national tests you've done in Australia, the national tests you've done in Scotland. There must have been a big part of cultural shift required there in terms of both political and grassroots at the schools. How did you guys approach that?
Well, part of our approach is to do what the client asks us to do, of course. But I think what you're describing is a challenge. What we try to do is to keep our focus through our assessment work pretty sharply on learning as the goal. So we actually have the tagline that we use, improving learning. That's our core business. But there is a mind shift that's required, I think. It is about a mindset. The traditional way of thinking about education generally, I guess, is the curriculum spells out what's to be learned. The job of teachers is to teach it. The role of students is to learn it. And the role of assessment is to establish how well students have learned what they've been taught. So there's a judgmental aspect built into that kind of mindset. And I guess part of what I was trying to say in my presentation was we need to rethink that mindset. We need to say the fundamental purpose of assessment really should be to understand where learners are up to in their learning so that we can think about what we do next. Now, of course, as you say, governments want to monitor what's happening across the system. They want to monitor trends over time. So we can't ignore, and people need to be selected for entry into higher education. So we can't ignore those purposes. But I think we just need to keep pushing back and saying, to the extent that we can, our focus should be on learning and how we best support learners and the learning process.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I've just spotted we've got a comment come through from Marianne Tolbert. Thanks for your question, Marianne. Almost a question and a statement, but it'd be interesting to get the panel's view on this. So Marianne says it's not just a cultural shift. It needs a practical shift in terms of teachers needing time to engage with research, whether that's reading it or doing it. And yes, paywalls are pernicious. So any thoughts on that? How do we give people, teachers particularly, more time to engage with the research and to try things out? Because that's a big challenge in itself, isn't it? Giving teachers time to play, in inverted commas, with new approaches. Any thoughts on that?
And fail as well, Matt.
And fail. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yes. Yeah.
That safe space in which to try something out and for it not to work, that you can then fix it, because that's how we get to where we are with assessments. There are an evolution of practice of things that haven't worked that we've refined over a continuous period of time to make it better, to have better outcomes from our students. So that would be the thing for me. And I guess the other thing from my own experience is that the job of a teacher, particularly in HE, is quite a difficult one. It's not only trying to be at the top of your game in your subjects, but you're also have an expectation to be at the top of your game around pedagogy. And so it's not necessarily a one size fits all. And an expectation almost that there is someone to support, which is kind of the role I have. In my current role at BPP University in the School of Technologies, I work with faculty directly to support them on learning and teaching. So we have that mold of the subject matter experience of technology and computer science and that machine learning, and my knowledge around learning and teaching aspects and an assessment. And it's a partnership, a collaboration to bring out the best of both of them, rather than relying on one person having all of the knowledge to do this as a one kind of one-man approach. And it's something I did in my previous institution, and it's something I would implore everyone to kind of have. And if not, at minimum, giving people that opportunity to, as I say, have time out of a timetable just to do some reading, to have a play around, to experiment, and most importantly, to fail and to fix things.
Yes, no, absolutely. Janine, did you have a thought on that one?
Yeah, I did. I also just wanted to say, I don't think it's something that we can solve overnight. I think it's a blend of looking at where we can introduce technologies to take some of the stuff away from teachers that they don't need to do, so that they can focus their time and attention where they need to, whether that's to be involved in research that's going to help to move the sector or their industry area forward, or whether it's actually to focus their attention at where their strengths are, which is developing and supporting learners to meet their potential. So I think those things go hand in hand. We need to start to use technology to take some of the burden away from the day-to-day activities that go along with being a teacher.
And I guess the only counter to that, of course, is having been a teacher, although many years ago, you're always busy, because if time is saved in one area, you just fill it with other stuff because there is so much to do. And so we go back to that cultural thing again, don't we? That says teachers have got to feel confident and confident in trying things, and know that the culture of the school or the institution that they're working in is going to back them up in that change. And Marianne's come back with another comment, which I think is also really, really good, which is, dare I mention, in the UK, this is initial teacher training or initial teacher education needing to focus more on assessment, let alone e-assessment. How true is that in terms of trying to get people? You're only going to be able to make cultural change if you instill that in the people coming through from the grassroots up. I don't know whether everyone's had specific experience working in that space from a research or just education perspective that wanted to say anything on that.
So just very briefly, it was actually a piece of research that Pearson did, testing the water, which interviewed over 1,000 teachers, I think, about this very thing and about their understanding of formative and summative assessments, and revealed that, just as Marianne's comment said, that they would like a lot more support with that. It's not about not necessarily knowing what that is. That's not what I mean. It's just there's ability and space to apply different techniques in the classroom was lacking. And then also, some of the more academic underpinning of that. So having the practice, but wanting to know much more about where that practice comes from, and therefore how they could change it, refine it based on the latest thinking. And that, of course, was the knock on to that is, of course, the initial teacher training. What else could be done there? And there's a GOLA piece that was, I think that's from 2019 as well, which again, that was around modern foreign languages. But again, it's about the competing priorities of what teachers need to learn during their initial teacher training. And those things are becoming more and more. And arguably with all the technology, of course, I think people just think, it's just too much. So it's kind of, how do we use, as Janine rightly says, how can we put some of that the way of technology? What could we do to reduce the burden, to enable them to have more space to gain some of this other understanding and knowledge that they would like to have in depth? Yes,
absolutely. Gareth, did you have anything to add to that?
I'm just in another life, I'm also involved in a secondary school on the trust board, and keep quite close to what's happening on the ground. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the experience during pandemic of teachers being forced to adopt technology in order to be able to continue to teach. in terms of the remote situation that we've all experienced. I think a lot of the fear and reluctance to adopt technology in the education space, especially in the school environment, will likely have dissipated somewhat. So I think there's a great opportunity for schools in particular to leverage that and really drive forward in terms of looking at how they can more effectively adopt technology in the learning space, and also how assessment for learning can be more included in the whole process, because certainly in Ireland there's a huge focus on terminal assessment at sort of GCSE level and then at A level equivalent, and people are teaching to the test, and there isn't really, it's all rote learning. Whereas there's now a movement, certainly at the GCSE or junior certificate as we call it here, to be more concerned about as Jeff was talking about earlier, a more pupil-based approach to their learning, and how formative assessment and continuous assessment along that route can be much more effective in improving the learning experience for individual children.
No, that's great. Thank you, Gareth. And actually, it's a neat segue into a question that's come in specifically for you, Jeff, from Martin McCain-Bremner. Hi, Martin. Thank you for the question. It says, Jeff, does this come to the convergence of formative and summative assessment? There's a big question.
That is a very interesting question. We've reached a point in assessment where we just accept this dichotomy, the formative-summative dichotomy. Over many years, and I was a student of Benjamin Bloom at the University of Chicago many years ago, who introduced the term formative and summative assessment into the assessment literature. But I must say that over all these years, I increasingly question how useful that dichotomy is. If you think about the purpose of assessment as I've described it, establishing and understanding where students are in their learning at a particular point in time, at the time of assessment, that information can be used in different ways. It can be used, as I said, to think forward about what you do next. It can be used to reflect on the progress that's been made by looking backwards. I think this could be a dichotomy that we need to think about. Have we overemphasized this dichotomy in our thinking? How consistent is it with what we now know about learning? And I guess, Matt, this is another general point that while I'm speaking, I'd make. I think we need to think about the extent to which our current thinking in assessment and our current assessment practices are consistent with what we now know about learning from research into learning. And when I reflect on that, I think there are many ways in which what we're currently doing is not consistent with what we know about what motivates people. Often our assessments drive more superficial forms of learning rather than deep learning. They treat everybody as though they're at the same point in their learning rather than individualizing or personalizing. Anyway, that's a general point that I'm making. But the specific question, I think it's a very interesting question. What is the future of this distinction, this dichotomy that we've created?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a topic of itself. So we're probably not going to be able to do much justice to it here. But it does prompt one thought in my mind, and I'm conscious of time, so we probably need to start to close off now. But that whole dichotomy is in part fed, and the maintenance of the summative focus, particularly by accountability. So assessment is a tool for measuring not only the performance of the student, and it pains me that often that's not the priority from a political perspective. From a political perspective, it's accountability of the school, of the teachers in doing their jobs correctly. And so any move to try to water that down or to spread that into a formative context too is surely going to be met with resistance. And I just wonder whether you've got thoughts on this as a group. How do we start to get people to shift away from constantly monitoring from an accountability point of view the performance of the teachers and the schools, and thinking more about, to your point, Jeff, about the progress of the students and what they need in their learning to move forwards. Now that's, again, big topic, and we could spend a long time on that. But as this is sort of, we're winding up time, can I just go round the panel and just get your thoughts on that, just very briefly? Gareth, let's start with you.
Yeah, look, league tables, I hate them. They, but they're everywhere, right? We had issues here with the leaving certificate, which is the equivalent of A levels, last year, which were graded by teachers, as opposed to people actually sitting the exam. So there was a whole modification process with the Department of Education and that kind of thing. But what it did do was it broke the connection with that terminal assessment, and it put the focus back on teachers and their assessment of their students. And it really forced them to take a very close look at each individual student, probably for the first time, whereas before they would have been focusing on the top performers and looking to make sure they got used as selection into college. Look, I think there's been an interesting debate over the last while about the role of teachers. More focused on the quality of the learning. There's been some interesting discussion and debate about whether or not that those final 2 years of secondary school here are properly preparing children for what they need when they go into higher education. And the truth is, it's not. It's focusing on skills that they immediately will discard, which is recall, and not focusing on things like critical thinking, collaboration, all those kind of things. So I think continuing the research theme, looking at what's working, what's not working, and getting that out into the public ether, so that those that make policy hopefully are more focused on the outcome, which should be an effective and successful learning journey for individual students that helps them get to wherever it is they want to get to, based on their ability and an individualized learning program. But there's no easy answers to it.
No, there certainly isn't. But that's a good point. Thank you very much for that. Janine, can I come to you next?
Yeah, so I think we need to start to try and change the narrative. So can we say that there's any likelihood that assessment won't be used as a performance measure moving forward? Probably not. But I think it's about looking at what else you can get from assessment as well. So one of the things NCFE are trying to do is really introduce assessment much earlier on in the learner's journey. So even before they've decided what they want to do for the next step of their learning, and really start to bring back the purpose and value of assessment at different points, and really pulling out the learning analytics that sit behind the assessment, because that's where we're going to start to move away from just seeing it as a performance measure, when people see the value to either them as an individual, a group, or a cohort of learners as a group of individuals, or even the institution, when you're looking at how they're supporting the improvement of teaching, learning and assessment, and ultimately outcomes for learners.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the outcomes for learners is the heart of it, isn't it? I am conscious of time, so I would like to come to the remaining three of you just for your comments. But if we can keep it quite succinct, that would be much appreciated. Pete, can I come to you next?
Rather than focusing on assessments as a process, maybe focus on the assessment tool. I mean, picking up on what Jeff and Janine said about measuring the learning outcomes. The best thing I did was going into a different discipline. I taught programming for 7 years. It wasn't until I moved into a life science department teaching maths that I realised there was better ways I could have assessed learners. And I've seen colleagues where I am now learning from the pharmacology discipline and transferring that into the legal profession, which I never thought was possible. Yeah. So just open eyes to what is being done elsewhere, and how could it help what I'm doing? That would be fun.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Just look a bit broader outside of your own context. Yeah, thank you for that. Eleanor?
I mean, I think I've probably said quite a lot on this already, but it's still that purpose thing. And again, not giving people that message that what we've been doing so far has all been wrong. and so now we're going to do it all right. I think that's sort of Janine's thing. It is going to continue to be used. So how can we improve things? What could we do differently, whilst still enabling people to feel that the learning they have participated in has value, and we're demonstrating that to them in the way that they are being assessed and showing them where that can take them, and not just sort of, as I say, suddenly saying, this is wrong, let's do it differently.
Yeah, and I think another point that you make there is it's about making the assessment process inclusive of the learner. So it's not, not something you're just doing to them. It's something that they're actively involved in and participating in. Jeff, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think economists have convinced governments that the only way we're going to see improvement in education is if we have incentives, carrots and sticks, and holding people accountable. I think maybe some research is what we need. Is that true? I've been doing quite a lot of work recently looking at Estonia, a small country, but they don't have the same kind of accountability mechanisms, and they're at the top of the world. So, I'd question the basic assumptions that accountability mechanisms and incentives are the only way we're going to achieve improvement and high performance.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. And it goes back to the heart of the whole problem, is that we know what we know and we don't know what we don't know from a cultural and policy making position. And it's about broadening that perspective and trying to understand what's going on elsewhere successfully. Listen, thank you very much to all of you for joining us for that discussion. That was really interesting. Thank you to the people who contributed questions from the floor. Jeff, thank you for sticking with us. You can go to bed now and relax. And as I say, thank you both. Thank you all again for joining us and taking part in the panel discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I hope you've really enjoyed that panel discussion there. I'm hoping what we can do now is move to having a conversation with the winners of the Best Research Project Award. And I'm delighted to be joined by two representatives from the winning organisations, Purdue and RM. Scott Bartholomew from Purdue University, Pete Collison from RM Education. Scott, if I can come to you first, because I'm sure there's lots of people out there who are really interested in finding out a little bit more about this project. And from what I know of it, and for those people who know me, I'm a huge fan of comparative judgment. So really pleased to see both the finalists in this section of the awards using this approach. You used comparative judgment slightly differently, not from an assessment perspective, but from a supporting the learning perspective, didn't you? Can you just give us a quick summary of what you did in that respect?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So we really wanted to flip things on their head and see if we could turn assessment into a learning activity in and of itself. And so our study is called Learning by Evaluating. And really the crux of it was, we said, what if we gave students the opportunity to look at previously completed work, so last year's work, before they ever begin? And they did that through a comparative judgment approach. They were able to see examples of what it was they were working on. And what we discovered is that they were able to really form in their head what it was they were trying to do, what a good one looks like, right? And so they went through this process of going of viewing last year's work, and we had a control and a treatment group, and quite a large sample size, over 500 students that completed this. But what we found was that there was a statistically significant difference as far as learning gains for those students that had this very small opportunity. Really, it took less than 10 minutes. But we did it right there at the beginning, and we found that if we can kind of get them on the right path before they start, they're able to achieve that much more in the long run. And we did that by taking assessment and moving it from the very end to the very beginning and having the students do that.
Which plays to a lot of the things that we were just talking about on the panel discussion about changing the role that assessment has and the relationship that it has with the learning and the curriculum. So that sounds fascinating. Thank you for that summary, Scott. And Pete, I understand that the heart of this was a comparative judgment tool. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how RM are involved in the project?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt. So RM are the providers of RM Compare, which is the underlying platform and tool that Professor Bartholomew used with his students. RM Compare is based upon a well-proven and well-researched principle of comparative judgment that's been around for a number of years. For those that aren't familiar with that, very simplistically, that's just simply the art of comparing pieces of work rather than looking at individual pieces of work in isolation. And it's been proven that that's particularly powerful when you're looking at work that is subjective in nature, where there isn't always a black and white, right or wrong answer, which is in probably 90+% of cases when students are producing work. It is inherently subjective. So it was a fantastic opportunity to be able to work with Professor Bartholomew and his colleagues and provide a tool like this to this research. And as Scott's talked about, the outcome of which was fantastic. And we're very proud to be partner to it, provide the platform to it, and are really excited about where it goes from here, because it's not often you get a chance to take part in studies of this nature where you can genuinely, really clearly point to the positive learning gains that have happened off the back of an intervention that in its design was actually so quick and so simple.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and student-led, so minimal impact, I guess, on teacher time, which we were talking about on the panel just now. And Scott, very briefly, because we're running short of time, this project, where does it go next? What are the plans?
Yeah, great question. So we actually just received a National Science Foundation grant to take this to the next level. We're going to be implementing this in schools across Georgia with one of the largest school districts in the state. And thousands of students over this next year will be able to use this approach. And so we're really excited to have the support of the National Science Foundation and to be able to really test this on a much bigger scale. And then hopefully it will just keep to grow from there.
Fantastic. Well, listen, many congratulations to both of you and to the organizations as well. Sounds like a fantastic project and well deserved as a winner.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it leaves me just to wrap things up now for today and for the whole series. I want to say a big congratulations to all the winners from today and also from the whole series of awards that we've been through over these last 4 weeks. Also to say a big congratulations to all of the finalists. The entries this year were huge, record-breaking entries. So it was hotly contested to become a finalist. So for those organisations who made it through to the finalist stage, many congratulations and well done on that. I'd like to end with a few thank yous, just to make sure that we say our thank yous and pay our dues to those people who have supported us in the ability to run these awards. Our headline sponsors, PSI. We just wouldn't be able to put on these awards without PSI's support. They've supported the programme of awards from the very beginning, and we're now in our 5th year. So we're really, really grateful to PSI for the level of support that they've given us over those years. To all of our award sponsors this year, a big thank you. So ACR, TCS Ion, Vreta, RM, British Council, City and Guilds, NCFE, and Prometric, and also to BTL Surpass, for the support that they've given us behind the scenes with the technical support for running the events. I'd also like to say a really, really big thank you to all of the judges, because without them, and there are 28 of them in total, we just wouldn't have been able to run these awards. You can see their names on the screen there. All experts in their field, all people who give their time freely to help us judge the awards. And having been on that side of the fence this year for the first time, it's quite a lot of work reading through all the applications and coming up with the finalists and then obviously deciding on the winners. So really grateful to everyone for participating in that and to Bob, who was our chair of the judging panel, just there to give us some guidance and support as we needed it. I'd also like to say a thank you to everyone behind the scenes who you just don't see watching this event. So there they all are. All members of the EAA board and supporters and active participants with the EAA. And again, just really wouldn't have been possible without them. Without wishing to draw too much focus on one individual, I want to say a big thank you to Tim, who's the chair of the Assessment Association. He's the person who's been running the technical scenes behind the scenes for almost all of the events. The only event he didn't do was the one he was chairing, which Gareth very kindly supported from a technical perspective. But a particular thanks to Tim, and in part to his wife, because his wife is very close to giving birth, and it was a bit hit and miss as to whether Tim was going to be able to join us today. So thank you to Tim for juggling all of this in amongst his personal stuff, and to his wife for putting up with him being pulled away to support us with this. So thank you to all those people who are involved in joining us. Obviously, at this point, we would normally say, well, thank you for joining us today and look forward to seeing you at the next event. But of course, this is the last one. But that's not the end of the journey. And I just want to reiterate the thoughts I said at the beginning about becoming a member. Completely free to do so, to join. You can use the link that's shown on the screen there, or just go to the E-Assessment Association's website, e-assessment.com, and click on the join link. It's being a member is something, yes, it's free, but it's about joining a community of like-minded individuals who are all there to look to support and propagate the use of technology, and look to explore all of the things that we've been talking about today. So please do join. Go to the website. You'll find lots of resources, case studies, examples of best practice. And you'll also find the recordings from the previous awards sessions that have been running over these last 4 weeks. So if you missed anything, you want to catch up on any of the keynotes, then you can find the recordings freely available on the website. So that's it. A big thank you to all of you for joining us today, and for those of you who have joined us on all of the 4 awards sessions. We are going to keep our AirMeet networking platform open now for another 10-15 minutes. So if you'd like to join us, meet some of the winners, chat to them about what they've been doing in their projects, come along to the AirMeet network. Again, if we could just put up the link on the screen for people to reference, if they want to join who aren't already signed into the networking platform, then just head there and join us networking after the event. But that's it for now. For another year of the E-Assessment Awards, the opportunity to submit nominations for next year's awards will follow in what will be a very short space of time in the autumn, usually around sort of the end of September, early October. We open up the process again. So if you know of a really good project that's delivering real change and impact with the use of technology, then do encourage them to submit a nomination and be up with a chance of winning an award next year. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope that you've really enjoyed the program today, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.